Hello and welcome to the Paul Howarth podcast. We're walking the farm today with Val Murray. And did you know that 1 in 2 people suffer with cancer? And last year there was over 500,000 people diagnosed. And Val's here today to share with us some of his experience, through lived experience of cancer. And Val, it's great to have you here on the farm. And when you hear stats like that, what is it that comes to mind? Because we're still not fully aware of what causes it and how to manage it effectively going forward, although some things have improved.
Crikey. The stat, I suppose, makes you think back to never believing that it would happen to you.
Okay.
Or you.
Yeah.
But it does. And also, when you're talking about why, I think we have an epidemic of ill health in general in our country and in the Western, so-called developed world.
So just outside cancer itself and critical illness in general?
Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt. Everything I've read and have listened to and been told, we're in a very poor state of health. So it is no surprise, therefore, that cancer numbers will rise. Yeah. And also post-COVID, again, I've spent quite a lot of time in the functional medicine world now, and those individuals very strongly see the link between COVID, such a nasty illness, and rates of cancer increased since there. But multifactorial. You know, if I talk about that unhealthy way of living, stress, diet, exercise, a root cause of, again, from what I've learned, almost every serious illness.
So tell us about your journey from, go back to where it started, where you see that this, started to work for you, manifest for you, and just bring us up to the present with it.
I think two things. I've always been either fit, strong, into sport, exercise, but I was felled by COVID. It's developed into COVID pneumonia in the second wave.
Okay.
So I was hospitalised, which was, on reflection, quite a scary experience. And I realised now I'd locked some of that away. Okay.
When you say locked away, what do you mean?
Moved on, as it were, or that was, as a lot of us do, well, that was quite nasty, that was quite serious, but let's crack on.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that was significant and almost definitely caused my cancer.
Okay.
But if it wasn't that, it was, again, something I look back on now, a very stressful life.
Okay.
For too long a period of time. And I now have a much clearer understanding of what that stress does to us, at a molecular level. Yeah. And it's not good. And I wish more of us would realise that or be made aware of it. There's just a general discussion, isn't it? Oh, stress is bad for us. Yeah. But we all continue being stressed and having stress and allowing stress to continue to become chronic. And it's a massive disruptor inside. Massive.
What's the earliest recollection when you feel that stress started taking place on the body for you? How far back does it go?
Early times in the police.
Okay.
Because I've spent just under 10 years in the Met, and a number of life events accumulated. I was playing and then coaching rugby at a really young age. It was a only a minor level, but I took on a role of club player coach, and had a father-in-law who was recently divorced, came to stay for 2 weeks, stay for 6 months. We were my wife at the time, we was trying to start a family, and there were problems, and so infertility stuff, and then the CID office I was working in became not a particularly friendly place for me, and I just walked out. I just walked out, and that was the first time that I really felt stress. Took time off. So yeah, that's the first time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the right moment to mention what I've learned about resilience as well. Okay. So I am, and I suspect you are, resilient, and I now see it's a strength, but it's also a weakness.
Yeah.
You'll have come across. It's just because I realise, and I do this now because what I've learned about resilience. So I get knocked down, and I get up again, and I get knocked down, and I get up again, and just repeat. But all of this stuff under here stays there, doesn't it?
Okay.
And I think every time you drop down, it just there's more compression. That stuff is more compressed.
Yeah. It's a fascinating one, isn't it, resilience? And a lot of the work with people, business-wise, founder-wise, career-wise, attaching an identity to the careers that we have, and it's quite widely a topic that's quite widely talked about. And tell me more about that kind of polarity of resilience, because it's a blessing and a curse in a way.
Yeah.
And what's the key bit because we need it.
Oh, absolutely.
But is there a point where resilience becomes damaging to the body if we don't do something else? Because what are we resilient against? Some pressure?
Yeah.
Tension?
Yeah. Or both, and all.
Yeah.
I think personally, when does it become? It becomes a problem when that turns into a degree of toughness, I think.
Okay.
That is then linked to a lack of care for yourself.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Because you're damaged. That's like damage. Yeah, that's damage. I mean, the blessing is, as you've said, it allows you to do a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Push through,
get through.
And I've
forward.
had a number of career changes, and people would say, "Oh, that's really successful," and wow, that's adventurous. But I look at myself. I mean, that was almost by, I forced myself to do those things because I'd had enough of this, or I'd had enough of that. It wasn't, I'll go on an adventure. It was, no, I can't do that anymore. I need to do something else. But I was bold enough to do that, yes. But you lose yourself in it because you're just moving on all the time. I do that, hand, and that's what I was doing.
So how does someone, because that's I like that, you lose yourself in it. How does someone not end up losing themselves in because we need it, we need the tension, we need the push, we need to get through, we need to perform, but how do you do it without a cost to your own health?
You have to be disciplined about rest, and you have to understand rest. Okay. Rest and recovery. I mean, when I ventured into horticultural therapy, I learned there's 2 types of recovery: active and passive.
Okay.
And I think you need a balance of the two. So I look back, my recoveries were always active. So I'd be playing sport. I'd be playing rugby. I'd be training Tuesday, Thursday night, play Saturday. Yeah. So I'd get an endorphin hit. Yeah. A dopamine hit. And I feel okay. When I stopped playing rugby, it would still be physically active stuff. Hill walking, mountaineer, and then riding my bike, and I'd ride hard. Go out for a day, do 60 miles. I feel great, but actually I'm not dealing with the stuff at the back here. It's only in the last couple of years I've got that clarity.
Because the illness that kind of forces you, it changes your perspective, doesn't it?
A critical time in your life, and I thought, that's what I was doing.
Can you just explain to it, because people are like, what's horticultural therapy? You mentioned, what is it?
What?
Horticultural
therapy is used. It's tapping into our basic biological need to be in nature, and to grow things, and to care, and to nurture. And there's a phrase, a concept called biophilia, which is clinically proven, which is our connection to this. You know, why how can you not feel good? Most people, and I've worked with some very challenged and challenging young people in particular, and just to say, come on, let's just walk in this woodland, and you can feel and see the stress levels, the cortisol, and it's been proven as well. Cortisol levels drop within about 10 minutes of being in nature. So it taps into that, but it's more targeted. So if you're a horticultural therapist, you will assess a need,
and then tailor
the activity to that person. So for somebody, say for a young person with ADHD, you would be looking at the active stuff, you know, doing and building and fixing and moving. So everything you could do in a garden or a landscape that would involve that generally would work better. But for somebody who's maybe PTSD, maybe coming to you from that angle, you need to be finding a safe place. You need to be aware of what type of landscape, because not every type of landscape is good for every person. So somebody suffering from PTSD will be, you'll know from your work, hypervigilant, won't they? So they don't need to be somewhere very open. They need something behind them, etc., etc. And again, you know, simple activities for them will be something that's absorbing, that will produce that flow experience. So that hopefully that sums up what horticultural therapy is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this leads us back to kind of stressing the central nervous system, doesn't it? Can you tell us about the specific type of cancer that you developed, and when you remember finding that out, what was happening in your life at that time?
Suppose the best context is COVID pneumonia, poleaxed, really sick, 5 days in hospital, came out, could not walk from there to there without having to put my hand on the rose because I was so exhausted. Started to feel better. Within 6 months I maybe rode my bike a couple of times for 30 miles, but I was knackered. Got back into some work. I'd gone back into horticultural therapy and some landscape management as well, and I was working on a project, and I started to feel really like I use the expression bone tired.
Right, okay.
Bone tired. I could do things, but I was exhausted. Little things started to happen, like night sweats. I think, maybe it's middle age or something, you know, because we have the menopause, and we have the andropause, and I'm thinking, maybe that's on it. It's a bit hot tonight, but I was changing my t-shirt, and halfway through the night, and eventually I was getting to the top of the stairs, or to be more graphic, go upstairs, reach the loo, and I'm thinking, I need to put my hand out here and rest. And I was starting to look at myself in the mirror and thinking, you don't look good. You look grey. So I did the classic thing, went to the doctor, and he said, we need to do some bloods. We haven't done bloods for ages. And I remember getting the phone call. I was down on the Wirral having a coffee with my old mum, and the phone rang, and it was the GP, and he said, we've found something in your blood. And immediately I was, well, what is that? Well, I'm not a specialist. I need you for, but can you give me your opinion on letting go? So he said it it could be a cancer indicator. So then I was referred to a hematologist because it's a blood cancer. More tests, and it was July 22 that I got the diagnosis that I had this rare blood cancer. It's called Waldenstrom's Macroglobulinemia.
Wow.
So, as some of my pals tell me, oh, typical, you've got something unusual, haven't you? You've got something that's special. So it's really quite rare, and it's incurable. So that was quite tough. But it's surreal as well, because you know, we're talking down the track about 1 and 2, and you never think it's me. You never think it's going to be you.
Yeah, sure.
You never think, oh no, I'm tough. I'm physically fit.
Yeah.
I'm strong.
Yeah.
I'm all right. I can cope. You know, and I say to everyone now, and I say to anyone who's going to watch it, just stop thinking it's not going to happen to you. Do everything you possibly can to live a healthy, balanced life.
Yeah.
And make the best choices you can.
That's
you know.
really good advice. I want to come on to more of that. I'm just interested in the pneumonia part and how that, you know, well, if it played a role in it. And I was just wondering about the process leading up to COVID, because it was a very difficult time for everybody. You know, did you follow the route of the advice with vaccinations and things like that? Like, what was?
Yeah. And interestingly, you've raised that topic. Due to the type of person I am, I was never going to just accept this is cancer. You've got an incurable cancer. Just accept.
Do you want to put your chest? It was blowing that way when we set it up.
Just accept it. The doctors know everything. They're going to help you, put you in the right direction. So I went.
Quite a normal response.
Yeah.
You're kind of attached
so
to the.
I want to know. I want to know as much as talking to you about your landscape.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I want to know, what's happening there.
Yeah.
And so that is my character. And one of the things I stumbled across was this world of functional medicine, which is, for those who don't know, that medical doctors, but they take a different approach, and that they look at your whole body as a system. And generally, I think there is a move towards that now.
Yeah.
Stop thinking of things, just the head,
Yeah.
just the thigh,
Yeah.
that old song, hip bones connect. Well, no shit, Sherlock, it is.
Yeah.
Everything's connected. So why would you just look at one thing?
Yeah.
So interesting. Kathy Gregg was the doctor I saw, and she was straight in on what vaccines have you had. And she was part of a group that were questioning the efficacy of one or two of the vaccines in particular. And I think now, well, I won't say it just in case there's libel involvement. There's one in particular I think that is generally suspected now as potentially causing damage.
What does that do? Because you're right, and I can resonate with that. Going probably COVID, you kind of look at it, you trust the doctor.
Yeah.
It's a very normal thing for us to do. And, if they release 4 vaccines and we're finding out that potentially 1 or 2, what does that do for future decisions? Because how do you know that the next time something comes in that's being presented with you that it's going to be right? Because it's a life or death choice, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't think you will know. I would still have faith, in the vaccine process. I think anyone who doesn't needs to look at the evidence and look at how it's changed society in however many years. Was it smallpox, wasn't it? Was the first vaccine, and they work. But I think what it has quite rightly done has made more people question the standard approach to managing disease.
Yeah.
It's had its time.
Yeah.
And there is a general move that I
So are you
pick
saying
up.
look at the full spectrum of options available to you. Because interestingly,
absolutely,
how things have developed. I mean, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but I can put a benchmark in. My children have age ranges of 22 down to, a year old, and the child vaccines 22 years ago covered, I'm going to say, sub 10 different illnesses.
Yeah.
Now it's nearly 100.
Yeah.
In one vaccine.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of how things change and shift. There's no medical invention comes in, and it's like,
yeah,
we've moved forward, hasn't it? And I think one thing with COVID is it did that, didn't it? It enables to go, hold on a minute. And I think the stats are staggering where you go to one doctor, even medical doctor, where you go and then you go to a second one and it's something like 60% you get a different opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think that there's a law been introduced recently, hasn't it, as a result of a child death, where everyone can demand a second opinion. And my general advice is do so. Do so, and do your own work.
Yeah.
Become, empower yourself.
Absolutely.
Find out as much as you can.
Yeah.
And I know there's a certain amount, there's a limit there for different people, different socioeconomic groups, but I think we should have more organisations that help people do that as well. Because what I've learned now, I think everybody should be aware of.
At what point did you think, I want to go and look at other things? And so just tell us a bit further about your process with that. What did you find first, and then how did it develop?
Yeah, almost immediately, I read about, and I don't know how I came. There's a Jane, I forget her surname now. She was a physiotherapist, so she had some medical background, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. You've got 6 months left to live. And she was similar to me in makeup. Well, I'm not going to roll over. I need to find out. So she basically got as much knowledge as she could, spoke to as many what we would call generally, and I think it can be a dismissive term, alternative experts. And she's now something like 15 or 20 years clear. I think, if I remember rightly, her book is quite science heavy, so it's quite a heavy read if you're not a scientist, and I'm not. She was quite keen on and used heavy dose, ultra high dose vitamin C.
Yeah. Okay.
And a number of other things, but she cured herself through what conventional Western medicine will call an alternative route. But actually, when you start investigating, a lot of these things are based on good science. And you kind of, I meant to pick it up before, what I've learned now is, and it does feed into the cynicism about vaccines, is the control that Big Pharma has on what the narrative on availability.
Yeah.
It's massive.
It's staggering, isn't it?
It's just, and it's frightening.
Yeah.
And again, everybody should be aware of that.
Yeah.
Who's telling us what and why.
Yeah.
And don't go down the crazy conspiracy route. You don't need to
just
do it. That's extreme information.
Yeah.
Information.
Because I remember the Prozac, the drug, when it was patented, it was very much pushed and sold.
Yeah.
And the second that it lost the patent, it was all of a sudden bad for you.
Again, anyway,
it's staggering, isn't it?
If you haven't watched it, watch the film, the Netflix film, docu-film about fentanyl. Truly frightening and true. And then it will give you an understanding of how the system works. And then, bringing it down to my personal level, you realise I find something, that's very effective against cancer. And it might be a particular form of cancer. Why isn't that being marketed? Wow, or why isn't somebody speaking to me about that? Well, because it hasn't been through the gold standard phase 3 randomised controlled trial.
Okay.
Who controls them? Where are they done? The big universities. Does that cost a lot of money? Millions. Yeah. Randomised phase 3 controlled trial. Yeah. Millions. Who funds them? Big Pharma.
Who funds Big Pharma?
Yeah.
There we go with it.
Yeah, there we. So it's
And again, I think it's important that we see this two sides to the same coin, because at one level it's still important. You know, we can't just completely dismiss everything, but you've got to use your discernment to kind of like just stress test it and go, right, well, where, and then come up with your own.
Yeah, and Western, and the term I use and have learned is allopathic. Allopathic treatment is the traditional Western approach.
Right.
So the way forward, and generally the people I have read and studied, they would say, let's have a combination of both.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
allopathic will rely on really hard evidence-based and randomized 3 controlled pharmaceutical interventions, but generally is symptom-based, whereas the functional medicine approach, integrative medicine approach, herbalist approach, naturalist, holistic approach is everything else. And there's an amazing stat that I quote to everyone. You know, I'd ask you, what percentage of our modern medicine, pharmaceutical, has its origin in plants and nature?
Oh wow. I'm gonna think it's quite high, because it's got to come from somewhere. 75%.
Yeah, it's 90.
Wow.
It's around about 90%.
So the origin of what
all
presented
of our
as
medicines
medical
are pharmaceutical, the chemically manufactured stuff.
So something
is
works
based
and then
in
it's
nature.
packaged up and
Yeah,
sold.
so they reproduce
Okay.
it chemically.
Got it. Wow. Yeah.
90%.
Yeah. Okay.
So why
that makes
wouldn't
sense.
we be looking out here? You know, and when you start reading about old herbal remedies, I've now found out that a lot of them have a load of good science attached to them,
Yeah,
and they've been through mice-based trials that have a
Yeah.
cinema anatomy to us. They've gone through some human-based trials, you know, phase 2 trials, even a lot of the things.
Can you help us understand? I always think it's better, you know, speaking to someone that's followed the path. Tell us what cancer is. How does it develop in the body, and what is it? I know you mentioned the blood condition, but can you tell us from a cellular level, like what happens, what it is, and just help us understand further about?
I'll try. My understanding, well, there's 2 schools of thoughts that it's a problem in breakdown and repetition of cells. Something goes wrong in that, because we are breaking down all the time.
And is
all
that
the time renewing?
then the argument that stress then influences?
Because it interrupts that natural process. You know, every night when you go to sleep, you are breaking down material and renewing. Cells are renewing. The DNA is being copied in a tissue cell in my thigh. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but it's what the knowledge I've acquired. You know, so at night the skin cells are you know, they're sloughing, but they're being copied and renewed. So at some point in that copying process, there's a breakdown.
Okay.
So malformed cells develop. But that's happening in all of us now.
And
all of us.
And the environment.
And the environment.
All
the time.
The soil, the breaking down.
If your body is in a healthy state, it deals with it. Those cancerous cells get mopped up. If you're under chronic stress, we haven't used the word inflammation. Inflammation in particular is in a chronic state because you're under chronic stress, or you've had a major other illness like microglobulinemia. My immune system was under massive pressure, massive pressure.
Yeah.
So it can't deal with it.
Yeah.
So those cancer cells go, well, hey, we're off.
Yeah.
And in some cancers they'll start to coalesce, and is it angiogenesis, new blood cells, so that's when they become tumour-like.
Got you.
It's the other theory that's creating much more of a hold now is a metabolic disease, so it's about energy. So you have a breakdown in your energy system, again COVID pneumonia, chronic stress, inflammation. So there isn't the mitochondria, which is the energy, the battery packs inside each of our cells. they don't function as well. So the energy isn't produced for that cell to reproduce and to function properly, so it malfunctions. And again, these cancer cells, they replicate very quickly because they're searching for, again, my understanding is they're searching, they want to reproduce, but they're reproducing badly. So they're really rapid. That's why we have chemotherapy, because they're rapidly producing cells. Chemotherapy destroys all rapidly producing cells. That's why it affects the rest of your body. But it affects the cancer cells the most, because they're the most rapidly producing.
But also affects the immune system.
It's madness. Again, I understood that when I started reading about it. Why are we doing this? Why are you filling my body with this? And you're destroying my immune system. That's kind of a risk-reward thing. That's my basic understanding.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But then it leads me on to gut health, because it destroys your gut microbiome.
Okay.
I was more sick after chemotherapy because of my gut. It's called dysbiosis, and your gut is just completely upset. All the bacteria and the likes, they're just not functioning. They've been wiped out. So you've got this, it's dysregulated. It's not. I was really sick, but no one told me about that in hospital. Oh yeah, your gut microbiome will be destroyed. Right. Okay. You need to start from the bottom. You need to refill it with probiotics and etc. and kill off any. See, I had candida overgrowth in my gut, and that made me so sick. That was draining all my energy. So
how
again,
did you find that out? How did you?
Through functional medicine, and then a specialist. She referred me to a specialist nutritionist. Yeah. And so ran what they call organic acids tests. So it's amazing. So by testing your urine, they can see what is and what isn't present, therefore what has or what hasn't gone through the system correctly. So you could see that there was an imbalance. So it wasn't 100% conclusive, but it said you probably likely have candida overgrowth, and that affects what's called the Krebs cycle, which is the energy cycling. So I was feeling knackered still. I was thinking, Jesus, what?
Is that something that you'd recommend or suggest? Because it seems like it's actually a good foundational assessment to find out when. Because I can relate to it. You're tired in the afternoon, because again, it impacts the performance, doesn't it? And getting on and stuff like that.
Well, again, two things I would highly recommend is get a set of full blood tests, pay for them privately. Rangan Chatterjee, superb doctor, runs his own really successful podcast. He has for years been saying, why isn't what's available in the States available to people in the UK? I.e. just phone up in the internet, can have these blood tests, and they will look for things that you won't necessarily find on, well, you wouldn't find on an NHS test, like a chemical called ApoB1, I think, which is a significant indicator of heart health. And so for example, and I would kind of spread the word with Rangan's platform now called Do Health, £250, one blood test to start it off, 3 further through the year, coaching and advice, feedback, so all about prevention. So there's that, and then there's the organic acids tests, and I think they give you a really good view of your core health, where you're at.
Well, if we can we'll put those links in the thing. I think that'd be really useful for anybody to go and do. And how much, because we talk of cells, and we talk of the formation of that, and obviously where that takes place is very early on in life. That's the foundation of we're growing. How much do you associate or link back to early life experience that then kind of knocks on into future and into adulthood?
Well, what I've learned is, if you go and have a full assessment by a functional doctor, he or she will be asking you questions about how you were born. Yeah. Okay. Even the
vaginal
birth,
cesarean. Because I was going to say, there's so many more
again,
birth
the
now than
science
they've ever been,
is so significant now about the importance of to your immune system of how you're born,
going through the canal,
how you manage after, and breastfeeding, etc. And it's we shouldn't ignore it. It's not wacky science. It's
natural.
It's proven, and it's natural. You know, you talked about your kids having vaccinations against hundreds of things, and yes, you know, undoubtedly some of those will be essential. But we also know, and it comes back to, you know, my horticultural therapy experience and teachings in that area. You know, you need, as a kid, they need to be exposed to that. They need to be getting dirty.
Yeah, for the gut, for the bite.
Yeah, because it all feeds in and it builds this.
You
know, 70 to 80%, depending on who you read, of your immune system is based in your gut.
Yeah.
Why don't we all know that?
Yeah.
So, you know, we're living really unnatural lives. Kids are, in particular, and generally we're eating an appalling diet, and it's no wonder that we're all more sick. It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts that I have to watch myself and say I'm retired now. I don't need stress, but you know, so much would be solved if we were intervened at a young age, right from birth. Right from birth, we'd save so much. Again, that's been proven. And I remember that from the research I did when I was more active in the field. It's been proven. You intervene and you get the food, nutrition and exercise right from a young age. It saves society so much money.
Yeah, and I mean, growing up in different environments, it all knocks on and it's all interconnected, isn't it? You know, we talk about, you know, big pharma and how it's influenced, and the options of people when they're coming into birth are limited sometimes because of that they're brought up in. But I think one of the key things, the most inspiring things for me and for your journey is whatever's gone on, nothing's fixed. So you can improve. You know, just like you mentioned, then the ground. Or, you know, you can improve the soil. It's like the gut biome, the soil. It's like, you know, it's thinking about that
it's a good analogy.
Like you can put different inputs into it to change it. It can change the cellular, and that's one of the most empowering things. And actually, from, you know, a lot of the work that I've done, the biggest cause of stress, one of the biggest causes, because we looked at the career, the police, you know, and that's got a lot of identity attached to it. It's got a lot of security attached to it. When we feel insecure for money, whatever, career, identity, then that is enough to send us all over the shore. Yeah. One of the biggest is suppressed emotions. The inability to express anger, sadness, grief, loss. Yeah. That has been one of the biggest impacts at a cellular level on stress. Yeah. And again, that's something that we can all understand and learn. A lot of the time it's subconscious, because we're running off patterns when we think that how we attach and how we respond to situations. Yeah. But again, that building up as just like, you know, going to the gym and the obvious ones, eating, but emotional intelligence is so important. Having the ability to be able to express and be aware that you may have anger in you that's never been allowed to come out. Yeah. What's your, you know, how do you relate to that? Does that make sense to you? Yeah, massively. Well, you know, I've just finished reading, just put Gabor Mate's book down, and I would always have classed myself as being quite emotionally intelligent. I mean, I knew that time when I walked out in the place, and I went back in. I knew I needed some help. Had gone too far. I was stressed, depressed, mild depression. So I had some counselling then. I had counselling at another couple of pinch points after divorce and really traumatic experiences. And I thought I dealt with things, but it's only post-cancer, and I don't know whether I hinted at it when we bumped into each other in Clitheroe, but
So to give everybody the full picture, so I went through chemoimmunotherapy with steroids, and it was hell. You know, I wouldn't downplay it. You know, 1 or 2 people are lucky; they don't get too much. It doesn't upset them too much, but it was. I thought I was dying at one point. It was not good. You know, I remember Deborah at the end of the bed thinking I was dying, and calling in emergency help. So I went through that. We saw some improvement after 2 months, but on the 3rd month my stats started to drop again. The cancer this cancer produces a faulty antibody, basically. We call it immunoglobulins, and it's thick and sticky, so it starts to clog up your blood. Okay. So you get lots of knock-on effects there, like your retinal bleeds, you could lose your sight if it progresses, lots of things. You can imagine your blood's connected to everything, so it starts to wreak havoc. So after 3 months the stats started to drop, so that was a difficult time. But cut a very long story short, and this is where I'm very thankful of Western pharmaceuticals. There was a drug had been used for some cancers previously, and it was being revamped, for want of a better phrase, to see if they could get rid of some of the side effects. And the hematologist told me that it was about to become available. I was lucky, only to be used with about 4 or 5 other specific cancers, two blood cancers. So I had to wait until I became more sick. I had to wait for my stats before I hit the threshold that I could have this drug. So I went on to that, and that was after about a year after the chemotherapy had finished, and 2024, and within 3 days I woke up, and it was like I could feel the energy. It was amazing.
And what was that?
It's called zanubrutinib, and what it does is it blocks a growth enzyme called kinase. So it's a kinase inhibitor. So on each cell, I mean, we know now from reading Gabor Mate, you have millions of receptors all over each cell doing all sorts of communication all the time. And kinase is one of these enzymes that comes in and says grow. So this drug blocks those receptors for kinase, so the kinase can't get to it to a certain degree. So again, a bit like chemotherapy, because those cancer cells are the ones that are dividing the rapidly, it has the highest impact on those cancerous cells.
Okay.
But this downside is it knocks my other blood cells back, so I have lower platelets and low other white blood cells, so I have slightly lowered immunity, but that's fine. You know, and again, they've improved. You know, over the last 2 years, those stats have improved, and I think it's down to some of the things that I do. I can't prove that, but I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. So coming back to the emotions, so about a year after that, I was thinking, why am I not jumping up and down? Why am I not feeling tremendous? I've been saved. Still, I understood that, you know, there's going to be a risk when something, I feel something, shit, is that cancer, has that drug stopped working, is it? So there's a lot of insecurity, but I was generally, why can't I live my life? Why am I not happy? So again, long story short, I realised through some more therapy that I probably had an element of complex PTSD because of the various life events, a number of them in the last 10 years, and then looking further back as well, in this business of resilience, banging up and down. So I was pointed in the direction, and you'll be very familiar with this, but I wasn't. Somatic therapy, life-changing, Paul. Life-changing for me. Yeah. Within one session, it was phenomenal.
Wow.
Phenomenal. Because I'm not stupid. I'd acquired a lot of knowledge, and I knew about all that, and you'd be feeling this, and this will be happening, and it's understandable that this, and lots of physiology as well as the mental. I knew, but it was locked in my body.
What was?
The various traumas.
Okay.
And in particular, one key one. Notice kicking my legs out. When I had COVID pneumonia, I was lying in, we called it the sick room at home, and I was getting worse and worse. I developed horrendous pain in my thighs, and I understood how people can get into self-harm then, because nothing could stop it. But you can understand how people hurt themselves to get a relief from that particular pain, don't they? Yeah. It was so painful. And I have a high pain threshold. Now after that, every time I felt stressed or I was in a difficult situation, I would feel pain. All of that would come back, the heat and lots of other symptoms would come back, as well as the classic irritability and anger. And I developed as well, I've read about mirror pain synesthesia as well. I'd be watching something on the television, there'd be an accident, and I'd feel it, I'd twitch. So again, all of these things, just when somebody sits down and when you start reading Gabor Mate or Bessel van der Kolk and you think, is that right? Well, I can assure people it is. The body keeps it.
Yeah. Tell us about somatic, your experience of somatic therapy. What is it? What does it mean to you, and what did you do?
It's about coming out of here, and for me personally, it was.
If you come out of here, where do you go?
Into your body, okay. What you feel.
Okay, so you
you feel it.
Yeah.
You're made to concentrate on how you are feeling at a level that I'd never done before.
Okay.
Never done before.
And how do you access that? Is that through that? I don't mean I mean, like, what's the therapeutic process?
So, I mean, to get the lady I see, Katie, wonderful and very skilled, and she's a yoga practitioner as well. So I was expecting to do yoga, but we get there, and it's just talking about safety for me. Okay. Because PTSD is about threat, isn't it? Whether it's complex or simple, dynamic, single event, and she would make me tap into something or someone or a memory that I associated feeling safe with, and then what does that feel like, and sit with it. And I found I wanted to talk about and I'd go into here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'd go into here, and she wouldn't be so explicit. Yeah. Just guide. Let's just. But what's
so you anchor into some safety.
Yeah. And one of the first things I noticed was I had spent God knows how many years like that. My pelvis was tilted.
Okay.
And it made it was, and I thought about it. I'll go back a little bit. So in the very first session, it was about, feeling glad and reminding my body, a little bit of mine as well, that I am safe, that those events had happened. We'd had a hideous neighbour dispute at the same time as well. It could have wiped out our entire retirement savings. All at the same time, we were managing the COVID and the cancer. It was a horrendous time, truly horrendous. And it was just, she reminded myself that I and my body was safe now. Those things had finished. So how does that feel? So for example, I could actually feel my thigh muscles start to lengthen. She would pay a lot of attention to sitting And just over the next week or two, I realised when I was in the car, I was like that. I had a curve in my lower spine.
So quite like,
yeah.
You're up ready
yeah.
for...
And I was trying to work out what it was.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
I got back to her and she was like, kind of one of those, she didn't actually say it, it was like, no shit, Sherlock, because that, and you read about trauma release exercise and they concentrate on the psoas muscles, don't they?
Yeah.
And so that was about, I'm at it.
Yeah, I'm ready, ready to go.
I'm ready, I'm having it.
Yeah.
And I also realised I was waking up almost in a fetal position.
Right.
Because I was tense like that. So it's just been about, and I've done it now while I've been sitting. It'd be interesting watching myself back if I'd done it a few times. But I rarely sit like that now.
Yeah.
Almost always. I'll, try not to be too, male and macho about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just sitting down. And I rarely, if ever, do I find myself in the car with that pelvic tilt on.
It's fascinating,
amazing.
isn't it? Because we started this and we were talking about performance and resilience, and for you, like rest and downtime was doing something physically active, going on a day's bike ride, climbing a massive
being
mountain.
up in the hills, pushing
which
10 hours, being exhausted.
There's a place, absolutely.
Yeah,
great.
love it.
But is this the first time you'd actually accessed yourself through the body mindfully? Is it the first time you'd actually gone and put some attention and focus on the physiological side?
But it's about the level, because Deborah, my other half, she'd introduced me to yoga, say 20 years ago, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I'd become more aware of breath in particular.
Yeah. Okay.
And certainly through my horticultural therapy studies, I'd broadened my mind, but nothing like to this level.
This is about you. This is about, because you can learn about the soil and learn about the woods and learn about the environment, and I can resonate with that being here. But how much do you turn the lens inside?
Never done it to anything like that degree, and it has been mind-blowing. And I'd even developed soreness in my forearms. That was another symptom. Why am I? And again, I put it down to you get some after effects from chemotherapy called neuropathy. So I'm thinking maybe that's neuropathy, but actually no. It was that
tensing?
What was that? And that's gone now.
Yeah,
that's gone. And consequently, guess what else has dropped back? Irritability, anger.
Yeah.
But if I'm feeling that I'm heading towards that, because I'm very sensitive now to overwhelm, and I realise my default has been to overwhelm.
Yeah.
It's about feeling I can cope with it all. Bring it on. Yeah, I can do all of that.
Yeah.
I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
We had a really difficult time in a workplace, and I ended up kind of spearheading a staff response, and it was another massive trauma. It was everything without there are things I can't talk about for legal reasons, but it was a massive stress. Massive, but I took it on.
Yeah. Which was
look, that's
kind
me.
of the nature of...
I've spent 10 years in the police. I'm good at gathering evidence. I'm not afraid at challenging authority and taking on the establishment. I'll do it, so I'll take it on.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
So is a big part of creating that space for yourself then managing your boundaries? And have you become more aware of that? Kind of what you pick up and what you choose to get involved with, and if that situation come up now, would you do that, or would you look at it and assess it and go,
I've thought about that. I would, because that's my values and beliefs are at stake there.
Okay.
I mean, I believe in truth and honesty, and I believe people should be held to account.
But at the cost of your own health? Is there a
that's
marker
where
in
the
there?
boundary would be. I would hope I would manage it entirely differently.
Yeah, got you.
And I might even bail out earlier.
And that's such a big shift. I use the phrase the ID and the I am. The ID is the kind of identity, old self, which is like the first version you explained, well, this is what I do, this is what I am, I'll sort it out. And you take it on, you take all the stress on.
Yeah.
And the I am is still living a valued life, still doing all those things. but putting that caveat in there that it's not going to come at the cost of your own health.
Yeah.
And that's the two different things, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. The other therapist would do that. Watch me breathing like that, and what's that breath about? We used to call it the preparatory breath, and now what you're talking about is I would be much more kind to myself. Okay. I would cut myself slack, allow myself to make mistakes, allow myself not to deliver.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. Yeah. It's that's one of the big things that's come out of the last few years, in particular the cancer years, is getting a much clearer grip on kindness and self-care
for yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And without, because I think we all battle with how do you do that without being selfish? Because my upbringing would be very much selfishness is bad.
Interesting.
Yeah, not keeping your commitments, being committed, being loyal is a really high value thing, non-negotiable. So
and in the process, you abandon your own needs.
I now see what that's done to me. It's been really helpful, because I've taken part in some great things and been part of some wonderful teams, both sporting and workplace. And I'd like to think people would always say about me, a good team guy, really good team guy, and sometimes a leader. But at what cost?
Yeah. What a journey you've been on. Nothing but respect and admiration for you. I've got a few questions, just a few to finish with. What I'd like to ask you first is, if somebody out there is suffering with an illness, not necessarily have to be a cancer, critical illness, what advice would you give them based on what you've been? What's the one important thing that you could say, do this?
Second opinion.
Okay.
Outside of the traditional allopathic realm. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll keep it to one.
And what keeps coming back to me is the resilience and the performance. So if you had any advice out there for someone that was in business, that was growing, that was doing the career, and they were going to get forward, the tenacious, they've got a lot of willpower, they've got a lot of ambition, what's going to give them the edge from what you've learned?
Objectivity. That ability to step back, both from yourself and from whatever it is you're engaged in.
Right, okay.
Program that in.
Right.
And don't assume that it's just you that's going to come up with all the answers from that objectivity. Seek other people and sometimes professionals. Yeah, you've got to be able to take that, that classic metaphor that's used in therapy, isn't it? Look, imagine a camera focusing down on another person, and what is going on here? What's really going on here?
Consciousness, developing that consciousness.
But you've got to program that in regularly, and it's that thing is just be careful of those, because part of that is you're recovering from what the daily events are. Yeah. You're stepping back so that you can be objective. You can look in on yourself and whatever else it is. But be aware of those two forms of recovery, active and passive, and have you got both of them? Yeah. Because just one is probably not going to be enough.
That's great advice. And finally, you can only have 3 things that you take forward to keep yourself well, the practices that you have, whether it's the therapy or the yoga or the breath work or supplements, whatever that might be, what 3 things would you choose to carry you forward with your life with?
Food as medicine.
Okay.
Time in nature. Time with friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for watching. It's a fantastic, fascinating episode with Val, and we're going to put the links in the bio to a lot of the things that we've discussed today and reference points in there as well. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.